So everybody is here. Does anybody want to start us off with prayer?
I can.
All right, go for it.
Our Heavenly Father, how great you are. We praise you, we exalt you, we honor you. I thank you for this day. This is the day that you have made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. I thank you that you took care of us last night. You woke us this morning. And I thank you that this is a day to celebrate Rex. And I just thank you that you allowed him to see another birthday. I ask for abundant blessings and abundant favor to be his because he is your child. He is a child of the King. He walks in your grace and your mercy. And I ask that this time of fellowship be glorious, that you would have your way, that every work of the enemy be bound. And we thank you, Lord, that every hindering spirit is hindered from operating. We ask that you speak, that you help us to hear, that you be glorified. We ask that in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, AKB, for that prayer. Appreciate the words. So I know chapter 14, chapter 15 of Genesis was kind of rough because it started out with not a lot of information that seems relevant. But as I was reading through it, I realized that the 10 Commandments haven't been given yet. So that thou should not kill, and the other 9 hasn't been set in stone. So it starts off by saying, and I'm gonna butcher these names, but Amraphel was the king that was pretty much the head king of the 4 kings, Arioch, Chedorlaomer, and Tidal, and they were all in this conglomerate, and they decided to make war with 5 other kings, Bera, Bersha, Shinab, and Shemember. And then one that's not given a name, just says they're the king of Bela, which is also Zor. So as I'm reading it, it doesn't even say why they went to war. It just says that 12 years they served Chedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled, and then in the 14th year Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him attacked all the other kings. But before they went and attacked Bera, Bersha, Shinab, Shember, and whoever else, they went through Rapham and Ashtaroth, Kernam, which is in Ham, and they went through all these other lands, and they were just pretty much pillaging and taking spoils of war, taking all these things. And it was at that point when the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, and all these other kings that they had made war with had met them in the Valley of the Kings, which was pretty much a pit of cement, asphalt. And it says that in verse 10, I believe, yes, verse 10, that they met in the Valley of Siddim, which is the asphalt pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled. Some fell there, and the remainder fled to the mountains. Then the other kings, Amraphel, Arioch, Tidal, Chedorlaomer, They took Lot, they took all his stuff, and one of the people that escaped that battle between the kings found Abram, and told him about the situation. So when I read that, obviously, you think about it, we established last week that Abraham was rich, and it told us that he was rich, and he had all these livestock. So usually, if we put it in modern times, a rich person is pretty well known. Even if we don't know them personally, we know them by reputation of usually the things they have or the things that they've done. So the fact that Abram's reputation had carried all the way to Sodom and the Gomorrah area at this point because of Lot speaks volumes of Abram and who he was. And it says in verse 14 that Abram heard that his brothers, or his nephew pretty much, was taken captive, and he armed 318 trained servants who were born in his house, and they went to pursuit as far as Dan. And then they divided the forces up, and I was reading, so typically when it says divide, it means in half. If it doesn't give a specific number, usually it means in half, because divide means to break apart. So half of them went after the kings, and then the other half went after the kings as well. But they split the route. So it was kind of, I think in military terms, they call it a pincer attack. So when I was doing the research of how they even knew to do this information, or how they even knew how to fight, if Abram's more so just living his best life, to be fair, it says that in the study Bible that I have, that some research shows that Abram wasn't necessarily in an army, but he was battle wise. So he knew certain tactics about how to fight because he had so much wealth. He had to have some form of way to protect it. Therefore, he had those servants. And in order to have those servants, somebody has to be able to train the servants. So Abram knew enough to survive, but it also speaks volumes because he's going against kings who have technically a boundless amount of soldier power. And he did it with 318 people that he trained, or that were trained in the vicinity of himself. But these are the same kings, 4 kings and their troops, that had just killed estimately either 3 to 4 of the other 5 kings. So Abram and his group took down a group that had just killed more people than Abram had. So it shows that how not only how smart he was with battle, but it also goes back to chapter 12, verse 1 through 3, which we covered last week, where God said that I'll bless those who bless you and I'll curse those who curse you. Now, if you kidnap somebody's family member, that's not really a blessing. That's really a spit in the face. Whether you knew who Lot was to Abram or not, God didn't specify, well, if they do it on accident or if they do it on purpose. If they bless you, I'll bless them. If they curse you, they're going to get cursed. So I was thinking about this today for whatever reason, and trying to just put myself in like a mindset where I could understand where God's coming from. And it's like being a parent, which is also difficult for me to grasp because I'm not one. But if somebody does something to your child, the reasoning is the last thing that you're concerned about. It's the result of whatever you chose to do to your child that you're more concerned about, and the ramifications that that's going to have on your child. And I think that's kind of the point, like God's trying to illustrate how much of importance we are to him. I don't care about the reason that you did it. I care that you did it and who you affected. And Abram falls under God's care. So you go against Abram, you're going to get the wrath of God. And whether they knew that or not, it doesn't specify, but it does say that none of them made it out alive. They killed them all. It doesn't give us the number, and that I'm pretty sure that's for a good reason as well. I don't think the number is really the important part, because the word king already holds enough weight that if you look at it at a board of chess, you got a whole row of pawns. You got the queen next to the king, the rooks on the outside, the bishops, and the knights. So theoretically, you go through all that to get to the king. The king is the last line of defense, quote unquote. So the fact that he took down 4 kings with his 318 just speaks volumes of how much of a blessing that he had from God. And after this, they being Abram, go and retrieve Lot, the children and the women, and the king of Sodom, what is his name? Bera, goes out to meet Abram and his people in the Valley of the Kings. And also another king, I can't pronounce his name, but it's in chapter 14, verse 18. Melchizedek, which translates into, I wrote it down here somewhere, righteous king. And as we're going through it, you see that this king, I'll just call him King M for short, he's giving honor unto God. He's blessing Abram. And that falls back onto the chapter 12. Bless those, I'll bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you. And this king is giving honor unto God, but he's also blessing Abram as well. And then he gives Abram a tithe. Now, this is not the same tithe that was given later on to that 10%. This tithe, based on the information that I gathered, was the portion of everything that king had, but it was also believed that it's like the best of the best that he had, whether it be warriors, food, stock, riches, or whatever. And then the king from Sodom steps in verse 21 and says, give me the people, and then you just take the goods for yourself. So the same king that couldn't defend his own country, so to speak, who also ran and fled to hide in the mountains, has the gall to approach a man that took out his enemies with 318 troops. And it's like, give me the people that you're essentially getting out of this tithe, and you can take all these riches. And so Abram rebukes him and says that I have raised my hand to the Lord God Most High, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will take nothing from a thread to a sandal strap, and that I would not take anything that is yours, lest you should say I have made Abram rich. Except only that the young men have eaten, and the portion of the men who went with me, Anar, Eshark, Mamram, let them take their portion. So with that, he's basically saying that I'm not taking anything that you're offering, and I will also not take anything past what you've given us to eat and to drink. And it's believed that Abram did that because in that situation, Abram doesn't live in Sodom. He lives on I think it's the east side, and Sodom is the west, if I have that correct. So it's nothing for that king to go back and say, oh, I did this and I gave Abram all these riches after this great battle that we fought. So it's more so like you can't take the glory from God and what God did in this situation, and you have to face the failure of your battle, that you didn't go in and prepare yourself for battle. And at this point, it's already established that Sodom and Gomorrah are wicked cities. So if they knew who Abram was, and that's already described to us in the Bible because they found him after the battle happened, that means that Abram also has to know about Sodom and Gomorrah. So he knows that it's a wicked city because it also tells us when Lot chose it that the men there were wicked. But if you look in verse 16 of chapter 14, it says, "So he brought back, he being Abram and his troops, all the goods, and also brought his brother Lot and his goods, as well as the women and the people." Now, if you remember when we were talking about Sodom and Gomorrah, when Lot chose it, it said the men were wicked. It didn't even mention women. But here, it mentions women, which means at some point there had to be some type of procreation, and obviously it takes women to do that, and men. So at some point, there was the procreation of life between men and women in the city-states of Sodom and Gomorrah. Enough so for Lot to have them with him, also between the other people and groups that were taken from this pillage of these four kings. So I think 14 is more so just showing like the power that that God gives his children, because even though it never tells us that Abram had to fight a day in his life, we know from having things and people being thieves and people being just people being sinful individuals, that you don't necessarily have to be in a position of power to know that somebody might try you one day, and you have to be able to defend yourself on a physical level, because that's just the world we live in. It's not like highly recommended that you go out and be holier than thou strength wise and try to be that person and you've seen them, the people that wear those super small clothes that have the big muscles and just show their strengths on the outside. Strength really comes from the inside, and muscles are just more so a physical aspect of development. But I think 14 just shows that even though God's on your side, like, you can't fall short of physically preparing yourself, mentally preparing yourself, spiritually preparing yourself. Got to give you the tools needed to get to the points that you need to be, but you still got to put in some form of work in order to get there. And just like everything else, the Bible is a tool. The Bible is God's word. The Bible is, that spiritual tool that we use. Like weights would be the physical tool that we use. Books would be the mental tools that we use. So we have the tools. Yeah, that's what I got out of it. But moving to 15, God and Abram have a conversation. Abram's upset, or more so sad, because God promised him descendants. And then God kind of reiterates himself in a different manner. In chapter 15, verse 5, it says, "Then he, God, brought him outside and said, 'Look now toward heaven and count the stars, if you are able to number them.' And he said to him, 'So shall your descendants be.'" So the first time God told him the grains of sand. Now he's telling him to look at the sky and count the stars. Pretty much to say is like, I told you what it is. I told you what it's going to be. If you need another visual aid, here you go. But I've been with you up until this point. I brought you out of the land of Ur. I told you that I'll give you descendants. you have to be patient. You have to wait. It's not in your timing. It's in God's timing. But Abram also even offered the notion that he would have to pretty much adopt someone in his house from Damascus. I think their name was Eliezer. So as I was going through the study, they said back then when people couldn't have children, or the man and the woman couldn't have a son, they would adopt people in their household, a boy, and he would inherit that name, and he would be a pseudo substitute for the descendants. So the same way people adopt now, and you give them your last name, they become part of the family, but bloodline wise, they're not part of the family, which also means God's also keeping that bloodline straight, because if he would have adopted that person, this Eliezer, that deters the bloodline of Jesus, because that's not the bloodline that Abram and Eliezer don't share the same blood. So he can't be the descendant because they don't share the same blood, and God's blood flows from the beginning of Adam all the way through Abram, through David, and so on. So you can't be the descendant because you don't, for lack of a better phrase, you don't measure up. You're not chosen to be in that foothold. So God tells him to bring him a sacrifice. In verse 9, it says, "Bring me a 3-year-old heifer, 3-year-old female goat, 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon." Now, I don't know what's the significance of them being 3-year-old, but I do know a heifer is a cow that hasn't given birth yet. So that would be considered a virgin cow. So my thought behind this are all these animals are clean, sexual wise. So untainted blood, pure blood. And then he brought all of those to an altar, and he cut the goat, the heifer, and the ram in half. The turtle dove and the pigeon he did not cut in half. It says he divided it, but as we established, usually when they use the word divide means in half. So this is the part that there's two different parts here. I was trying to figure out why do we sacrifice, or why did they sacrifice animals back then? As being someone who has taken care of animals and currently taking care of animals, I couldn't see myself, killing Elsa, cutting her in half, offering to God. But then, this phrase just kind of entered my head, and it says that you won't understand sacrifice until you've made a few, and sacrifices are supposed to hurt. So if animals bear the pain and witness of, having emotions and the whole nine, you take something from, let's say, the 3-year-old heifer has parents, obviously. You take it, you kill it. The sacrifice is you're losing livestock. But the sacrifice for the animals is they're losing a young one, a child. You look at it doesn't just have to be the cow. It could be any of these animals that they sacrifice. The sacrifice is on both sides, and it hurts because you're losing, in this instant, livestock. And it could be an animal that they cared for. So the sacrifice is the willingness to go through the pain for a greater purpose. But also that a sacrifice can be double-sided. You can sacrifice good things for a bad result. So either way you look at it, a sacrifice is being made. You either sacrifice, in this instant, Abram could have said no. So he would have sacrificed his obedience and faced whatever the consequences were. We will never know because he didn't say no. So he cuts the animals in half outside of the birds, and if you can see my hands, he put one on the left side of the path and one on the right side of the path. And in the research I was doing, it says back in those days, whenever a covenant or a pact was made, when they would cut these animals in half, the two people would walk down the path of the sacrifice, signifying that we've taken this oath, and then if one person breaks it, then you inherit the whole of the oath. Same way now when people like spitting it, like pirates, if they spit in their hand and then another one spits in his hand and then they shake it, it's half and half, makes a whole. Or you shake your hand on a deal, half and half, make a whole. And usually if somebody breaks it, the other person gets the whole of it. And as we go a little further, you see that buzzards try to swarm in and take the sacrifice, and Abram swats them away. And that just reminded me of like you, and it's so crazy because even in his obedience, it didn't stop Satan from trying to tamper with Abram's sacrifice, even in the form of birds. So not only are you sacrificing, but during this sacrifice, he had to make sure that his sacrifice wasn't tampered with by the enemy. So he had to stay vigilant, pay attention, keep his sacrifice clean, keep it whole, and keep it where it was for God. And that, for me, that showed that even though you're doing the right thing, it doesn't stop you from having to face different battles on different fronts at any given moment. You have to stay vigilant, even though God told you, this is what I want you to do. He never said that you won't face, even now, he didn't say that you won't have to protect this sacrifice. He said, just bring it to me. But bringing it to him, make sure that it makes it to him. You don't just get to drop it off and then that's it. You have to make sure it's how he asked for it, in the same manner that he asked for it. And in chapter 15, verse 12, it says, now when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and behold, horror and great darkness fell upon him. So he saw a vision. Then he said to Abraham, him being God, know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them 400 years. And also the nations whom they serve I will judge. Afterwards they shall come out with great possessions. Now as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried at a good old age, but in the fourth generation they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. So he showed Abram pretty much everything that was going to happen. You're going to be fine, but your descendants are going to have a rough time. And it's going to be due to some mistakes that they made. And it goes back to, I think we either talked about this last week or the week before, but if God showed you what was going to happen after he asked you to do something, the end point, would you still do it? In this instance, God showed him, but it also really had nothing to do with Abram at that point, because God told him, you're going to be fine, but your descendants after this, they're going to have a rough time. But even still after that, I'll make sure that they're okay. I'll judge who they serve. But they're going to go through it. And it says in 17, and it came to pass when the sun went down and it was dark, that behold, there appeared smoking oven and a burning torch that passed between these pieces, the sacrifice pieces. On the same day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, "To your descendants I have given this land, from the river to Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the Kenites, the Kizanites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites." So back to the sacrifice thing. Remember, I just told you that during that time when people made an oath, they cut up the animals and they walked down the path. Abram's asleep, but when he woke up, his sacrifice was burnt, and there was a smoking trail walking in between the sacrifice. There was nothing that Abram had to do to uphold his part, because he didn't make a covenant with God. God made a covenant with him. So God didn't need him to walk down the sacrifice trail with him, because God's upholding the whole part of everything that he's given Abram. But the part that got me was God's presence was so strong that he set fire to everything in between those two sacrificial pieces. And it doesn't say how long Abram was asleep, but it says, it says that night and going into the morning. But the fact that God's going to uphold his whole covenant by himself, and he took this whole sacrifice, just his presence, just burned up everything, which is why Abram had to go to sleep. Because if we move forward to Moses, when Moses asked to see God, he said, "You can't, because if you see me, you'll die." And even the part of God that Moses was allowed to see, he had to wear that thing on his face, because his face was shining for the rest of his life. So this for me was really, really powerful for me, because I like to try to figure out, or at least try to comprehend, how much power like God has. Not to try to put it in some kind of box, but he can speak things into existence, and that's already strong enough. But the fact that his presence set fire to Abram's whole sacrifice, and that he's going to uphold this whole thing, and he's given Abram's descendants all this land just because he was chosen. There was no reason outside of that. He was just chosen. God said, "You're going to be, a blessing to all sorts of people." And this is just one instance of many. In this instance, Abram's he's not a nobody, but he's not a king. He's not a I don't really know who I can compare him to, because Abram's kind of like one of the mill. Because David was a shepherd, and he became all that he was, and all these people were. So Abram's kind of like an anomaly. He's chosen to do these great things, and through Abram, all these other people spawn from. And it just shows that your reputation does matter, even if it's people that you're not even close proximity to. The fact that Lot's being captured and Abram's reputation being so strong that they came all the way from where they were from to tell Abram that, hey, they have your nephew. And I think Abram going to get Lot is the representation of God going to fight for us. Even though Lot went to Sodom and Gomorrah, in my opinion, knowing that it was a wicked place, his uncle still went and fought for him and got him back. And that's the same way God is. We go astray. We decide that we know better, we know best through our actions. And like all it takes is just like one drop of a hat, and God's there fighting for us. And that just that amount of grace and mercy, and understanding, and the fact that Abram could go to God and tell him, hey, I want a child. You promised me descendants, and I don't even have one child in my house. And in order for me to even have one, I have to adopt. He could express that feeling of anguish, that feeling of, you said this and it hadn't happened, and I'm hurt about it. I'm sad. Why is this? And, God answered him. And I don't know if it was like a verbal answer or, like sometimes we get answers, but it says that he said, so I'm assuming that he was actually, like you can hear my voice, Abram was talking to God. And, God's patience to the fact that he didn't say, I've already told you what I was going to do, that he gave him another example. And the example that he gave him is just insane, because I don't think Abram at that time knew how big the world was. So for God to ask him to name or to count all the stars is just impossible to begin with. And same with the sand. He doesn't know how much sand's in the world. And if I'm not mistaken, sand is generally populated as rocks diminish when water hits them and knocks off layers of the rock. So sand just keeps producing itself. And the same with stars. Stars die, and the light you see is just the remnant of it being there. So it's just a continuous cycle. There's always stars, there's always sand, there's always a cycle, which is also another thing to take in consideration. That means that theoretically Abram's descendants won't stop until the end of time, because as long as his bloodline's here, it's just gonna keep producing, and through that bloodline the world will be blessed. So I think it's also important to make sure you watch what you say to people and what you do to people, because he says, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. And if that's the covenant with Abram, it falls on his descendants. So curse one of the descendants, you might be cursing you might be cursing yourself. So I think it's just important to take God at what he says, because like last week, he's very particular on the words that he speaks, and what he says he means, and what he says he plans on doing. And I think Noah was the only time where he gave a specific timeline of when something was going to happen. Outside of that, he usually, from my understanding, or so far, he usually just says, I'll do this. But very rarely does he say, in this time. And I think that's to also to help us grow in our relationship with him. To kill instant gratification, to destroy the want to want to be like somebody else, or have to have the latest of anything else, and to believe nobody's word but God, because as we go on here, I think in the next two to three chapters, Sarah's gonna say, we need a child, so go sleep with the maidservant. So he doesn't want, he wants to grow us, but he gives you free reign to do what you want. And we'll probably get into that next week. But Yeah, I think these two chapters were just important to show that even though God's on our side, we can't stay stagnant. We have to constantly be growing, not only in our relationship and faith with Him, but for ourselves, because we are the representation of God. We are the face that people see, the actions that people see, the love, the grace and mercy that people experience will be from us first, because, well, technically it'll be from Him through us, but they won't know that, because if they don't know who He is, obviously they have to learn that and associate it with something. And so we are essentially the pawns, the rooks, the knights, the bishops, the queens. And if you know anything about a pawn, if he if he makes it to the if a pawn makes it to the end of the chessboard, they can upgrade to any piece that they want. So just imagine yourself being a pawn, and you just got to fight through that other army, fight through that other side to upgrade yourself. And that's what all these hardships are. That's what all these spiritual attacks are. Because anytime you get stronger, the battle's going to get stronger, because God's letting you build that muscle, build that repetition, build that strength, that faith. But you can't, like, I couldn't at my current state go through what Abram is going through. One, I'm not rich. Two, I just be honest, my relationship with God just isn't as deep as his. And I figured that out as I read through the whole book of Ecclesiastes. I think I finished it either 2 or 3 days ago. And like the more you read the Bible and understand that it's pretty much not only like a script, but like a story of everything that God has done and everything that God will do. And this is just our part that we're living right now and God's whole story. But the crazy part is, like, you get to choose which part of the story that you're affiliated with. You get to choose, are you gonna be with the hero or are you gonna be with the villain? But my point with that was, you see yourself in some of these people. I've been Abram. I've been kicked out of places that I should have been in because I thought I knew better than God. I've had to protect people against other people. I've had my doubts and I've questioned God. I have denied people's gifts because they would have taken the credit instead of. I have been Noah. I have been drunk. I have blamed other people for my sins, like Adam. I've been all of these people at some point in time. But understanding that, like, that's what connects us all as a whole, and that's what also connects us to God, is not only the righteous things that we've done through him, but the sins that we've overcome and been forgiven of. I used to get down about, how much I've sinned and how many transgressions and iniquities I've committed against God, and it would put me in a state of why even try if I can't reach this perfect example of Christhood. And it matters that I've done those things, but it matters more that I've learned from those things and I don't keep myself in that same position. Because if Abram in this situation would have kept himself in that doubt, he would have never kept that faith growing. He would have never kept his relationship ever growing with God. And just like people say in the business world, you either grow or die. I mean, that's the same thing with God. Like, if you don't pray, if you don't get into the word, if you don't practice that word to the people who do things against you, because it hurts when people cuss you out or do all these things. You get upset, you want to get revenge. I know I do. But just keep in mind that you could do something, sure, and it would probably end up being a lot worse on yourself than it would be for them. Or you could let God handle the situation. For instance, I have a little story to go with that. Obviously, at my job, I've been having issues because there's this guy, Josh. Today was his last day at our store. He got transferred. He's very vocal about his faith, and he caught a lot of heat for it. And the manager was complaining to me about it. It was like he talks about God too much, and usually people like that, they've done something to the point where like they need it to be saving. But the first time I met Josh, it was a room of maybe 5 or 6 people, and he came straight up to me and he was like, "Are you a believer?" And I said, "If you're asking me if I have a relationship with Jesus, yes." He's like, "Yeah, I just didn't want to be that forward." I was like, "Nah, it's fine." And since then, like, I've just been talking to him. We had a conversation today about some stuff in the Bible. And just, he's 25. I just turned 32 today. So I have a little more experience when it comes to certain things. So where I am in my life, I'm able to give him what I wish I had. But as my mom tells me all the time, like, had I not gone through these situations, I would have never been able to help him better himself for, he just recently got married and he has a daughter, so he could be, a better example for them. He's going to a new store, so he has more opportunities to be a better example for other people. He got into it with the manager the other day, and I was in between both of them, so I heard both sides. So I was able to talk to both of them, but more importantly, talk to Josh, because he's, more open to the gospel. And I told him about that verse, those couple of verses that I sent you all from Ecclesiastes about the wise man and the city. I told him, I said, "That's you." And he was like, "You think so?" I was like, "Yeah, you can be wise all you want, but at the end of the day, like, nobody's going to remember you. So what I'm telling you is, like, you can have your opinion, you can have your vocalized thoughts, and that's fine. I'm not telling you not to do that or not to have that, but just, like, be discerning on it. Don't do things to cause trouble for yourself, even though you may be right in the situation, because ultimately you're just going to have more troubles." I said, I'm not telling you not to talk about God vocally. I told him the reason I don't do it like he does is because I know the more that I talk about it, the more problems I'm going to have. So it's best for me to just do it, live it, and be it. And if that opportunity comes, then I can introduce why I do certain things or why I do this. But I made sure to tell him, like, this isn't me telling you not to be vocal about it. Just be more mindful of your situation, because just because you have that faith doesn't stop people from going against you. It's not, you lose your job. It's not that God's not going to give you another job, but that may just be your lesson of, you just have to be smart about how you move. So he has my number. I'm sure I'll hear from him again. But that's just my example. It's a lot of the stuff that we go through, like KB tells me, isn't for us. It's for somebody else. And I really dislike this job, but I try to think about that every day I go. Every morning I wake up. I just ask for the strength to get through it. And it's been rough, but it's also brought forth this Bible study, because now I have something to, when I get back off of work, instead of mindlessly surfing YouTube or reading stuff that doesn't matter, or thinking about like what these celebrities are doing, I can come home and research the Bible and read further ahead, so I can try to unlock some things that you all may not know, and you all can give me some things that I may not know. I try to send you guys as much information as I find on the daily, but I think these 2 chapters are about sacrifice and about love, and both of which is just God showing us that sacrifices are gonna hurt, because God created these creatures that He's asking Abram to sacrifice. So I would assume it pains His soul to see these things being killed. But He also doesn't want us to go and get hurt out of our arrogance and or ignorance. But it also shows us that he's faithful to complete everything that He says He's going to do. But we still have to do our part if it's asked of us. And whatever that may be, whether it be kind to somebody that spits in your face, not literally, be forgiving of someone who's wronged you in the past, showing love to somebody that, let's just be honest, some people just don't act like they deserve to be loved. Just pretty much be to them what God's been to us. And that's hard sometimes, especially when they wronged you, especially when they do it on purpose. But I think that's what these two chapters were trying to show us. Not only about the human condition, but God's character as well through our human condition. Any thoughts, comments?
No.
I picked up some of the same points, but I also picked up the importance of obedience in sacrifice and doing it willingly and not begrudgingly, and the outcome that you'll get from it for your obedience.
Was it something that you could put towards like your real life, or is it more so like you could understand it just reading it?
Both.
Yeah.
I mean, we go through things in life, but when you have a good attitude towards something and do it with a happy perspective or positive perspective, then the outcome is a whole lot different.
Yeah.
And also, like you said, him putting Abram to sleep. Because a lot of times, if we know what's going to happen, we might try to step in and do things our way and mess up the outcome that we're supposed to have.
Yeah. KB, Faith, got any thoughts, comments, concerns?
No.
Well, I thought about the ultimate sacrifice, John 3:16. That's what all these sacrifices are pointing to. And also the third chapter of Galatians that tells us that we are heirs of Abraham if we belong to Jesus. So we're part of that number in the sand as far as when we belong to the Lord.
Mm-hmm. Joy, do you have anything to add?
No, I think you got.
And this shows basically, well, lexicon is no matter what it looks like, Lord said what he said, and in the past, even if you don't see it, or what fell on. But what he says stands, so no matter what it looks like, just try to do the best they can to stay focused on him.
Yeah. And go ahead.
I was just gonna say we're gonna go through things, but things have been a lot worse than they have not been with us.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. That's very true. I mean, I think about the time where there was a time my mom and I think all three of us were in the vehicle and we were going down the interstate, and then just the truck just started spinning in circles, and my mom was like, Jesus, and then the truck just straightened out, but there was no cars around us while we were spinning, and as soon as we straightened out, like, it was just like a rush of cars just were, it was wild. But it just, like, I don't know if they could see in the spiritual realm back then, if it was more open to visualization, since they had like giants and stuff back then during that time. But I just imagine moments like that, what it looked like on that other side, having something tampered with, something, and it's just out of your control. And you know, if my mom wouldn't have called on the name of Jesus, like, what would have happened? What would have happened if she didn't believe? If her faith wasn't strong enough to get through that situation, or she would have took a different route and started saying other words that weren't necessarily vulgar, but you know, Jesus was like the last thing to to come out. You know, that time difference, that timing makes a world of difference as well. So yeah, I think it's very important to just keep in mind that all these things, all these situations, I don't want to use that phrase of someone always has it worse, because that, I don't want to say that's irrelevant, but I can't live somebody else's life, so that doesn't really mean much to me. But the experience that we go through, whether good or bad, at the end of the day, are all just building blocks. And it really just depends on where you want to put those blocks. you got two options. You can build them in a safe haven, or you can just carry them around with you and let them weigh you down. But either way, the blocks are going to be there. So if nobody else has anything, I'll pray us out so we can enjoy the rest of our day.
I also want to make a point about the covenant. How important the covenant is. You know, the Bible tells us it's best not to make a covenant if we're not going to keep it.
That's in Proverbs, right?
And if I'm not mistaken, this was the first covenant that was made.
Noah.
It was not.
Noah, he made a covenant with Noah that he wouldn't flood the world.
Okay. Yeah. But it's very important if we're going to make a covenant to keep it.
Yeah, and I think that's why he made these first covenants and said that he wouldn't do something or he would do something. Because these were people fresh off of the flood and fresh during the flood. So they were probably prone to go either way at any given moment, regardless of how faithful they were, just because of the situation of what was going on. Because Noah got off the boat and got drunk. We'll see in the next couple of chapters that Abram sleeps with his hands, or what is it? Maidservant.
So.
Yep. So, yeah. Did you have anything else, Mom?
That was it.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll pray us out. God, thank you for this day. Thank you for this time to just sit and reflect on the stories of Bible past and your grand story of everything. Just pray that if I miss something, that you surface it up either in a later study, or that you bring the knowledge to everyone involved, so that they may also impart it into someone else later on down the road. Just that the knowledge that we gain just constantly increases, and that the hunger and thirst to understand and be better suited and be better prepared for life is given to us, and that you just strengthen us when we're weak, strengthen us when we're strong, and be with us at all times. Give us the eyes to see what we need to see. Give us the ears to hear. Give us that spirit of discernment so we don't go down the wrong path. It's so easy now because so many things look like they're the right way, and just ask that whatever way that we run across it, if it doesn't align with this book, this Bible that you've given us, your word, that we turn away and that we rebuke it, and be with us that we could be the pillars of salt for the world, the salt of the world, and just stand and make a difference in this dark time, and just always just always be with us. Forgive us of those sins, those iniquities, and those transgressions that we've committed, those known and unknown. Any covenants that we've made with demons and devils and unknowingly, just ask that you break those shackles, and you prepare us for spiritual warfare, and guide us in realms that we may not feel like that we're ready to go through, but just ask that we trust you in those situations, and trust you in situations that we're prone to trust you. In the holy name of Jesus, amen.
Amen.
Yeah.
So next week we'll be in Jackson, Mississippi. So we have two options. We can either do it early that Saturday morning because we have to fly back around 12 to 2 at time, or we could skip a week and just cover 15 through 18. Wait, I'm sorry, 16 through 19. What would be best for you all?
What'd you say, Joy?
Oh, I said it doesn't matter to me. I'm good either way.
Ma?
How early are you talking about?
It would probably be like 11 there, 10 in Mississippi. Yes, no, we got one, it doesn't matter.
What do you say?
Ma'am?
What do you say?
I would like to continue because I feel like if we skip a week, then it just kind of gives room for us to like skip another week somewhere down the line. And I'd rather stay consistent because I don't want us to like to drift, because the past couple of weeks I've read 2 full books, one of which I've never read all the way through was Ecclesiastes. So I've been able to like jump around and read a lot of books that I haven't like had the privilege to read because I want to be knowledgeable so I can give you all proper information. So I would like to do it next Saturday.
Could we do it later Saturday?
Well, we don't get in until like 9.
Oh. Just kidding.
I mean, we could do it at the airport. It's just gonna be. You'll hear a lot of
Background.
yeah.
Just tell me.
Ma'am.
Just tell me.
Saturday at 11.
What time does the flight leave Saturday?
2:20 something.
So would that be enough time between to do it Saturday morning and get to the airport?
Yeah, we just got to get there 2 hours early.
Yes.
So yeah, that would be 10 Mississippi time. So that gives us. Our study usually lasts an hour and a half. So yeah, they put us at around 10:30. Wait, 11:30. So yeah, that'd be enough time as long as that works for everybody else.
That's fine with me. That works.
All right, it is settled. Let me write it down because I'm gonna get confused with this time zone difference. So that would be the 16th, correct?
Yes.
All right, 2024. All right, 10A Central and 11 Eastern. All right, like always, feel free to reach out to me if you got any questions about anything, and I will do my due diligence to find the answer. We just found a documentary that has a bunch of those symbols and stuff that I showed y'all last week. So that's the last link that I sent. It's about 2 hours. So when you get a chance, give that a look. It's real. It's awkward to watch because the people are kind of awkward, but the information is, you'll be able to link it to a bunch of stuff, and you'll see a bunch of stuff that not only that I've talked about, that you've heard on the news or even in school that you're like, So yeah, just kind of just pray for discernment as you watch it, because it's a lot of stuff, and you'll be able to find like a bunch of phrases as well. One phrase that I'll tell you keep in mind as you watch it is death before dishonor. And once you find out why I say that, you'll start to be able to put a bunch of other things together. So if you got any questions, let me know, and I will do my best to find the answer.